Alright, anybody up for a deck tech? Because we're looking at something different today. Although, to be fair, we don't really need deck techs, and we don't usually ever look at anything different because I play Delver, and I play Teamer, and those don't really get that different once you're within that spectrum. They all kind of do the same thing with the same, I don't know, maybe 100 cards, including sideboards, so I don't think we actually end up with that much variation, but we're looking at something a little different today. Recently, someone 5-0'd with Rug Delver. The person's name, I believe it's pronounced Chaffee, something to that effect. Apologies if I totally butchered that. There are going to be links in the description for their two lists that they 5-0'd with. But basically, they are playing Rug Delver with Faithless Looting and Young Pyromancer. Obviously, when I saw that a list 5-0'd, I had to check it out, and when I saw Faithless Looting, I thought, that looks cool. We're gonna have to try that. And I believe the theory of it is Faithless Looting fills up the graveyard for things like Goyf, Hoots, Snapcaster Mage. It's a spell you can flash back for Young Pyromancer, which I was just thinking of when looking at my sideboard, because we often board in artifacts, enchantments that cut down on the spell count for Delver, but also Peasy now, and being able to flashback Faithless Looting actually is going to be pretty helpful, I think, for that, in that aspect, but it also lets you filter through your cards, and it acts as card selection, kind of like Serum Visions, cantrips like that. And the reason I'm interested in that is because I often talk about how we draw the wrong half of our deck. I don't know if I say that on the channel a lot, but I'm pretty sure I mention it in discussions, and that's a real problem with Delver, because against humans, you draw your counter spells, and then you can't counter anything, or really, against any Aether Vial Cavern of Souls deck, but humans is the big one right now, and our matchup, at least in Game 1, really sucks. So that's at least one place I'm hoping Faithless Looting does serious work. If you have a handful of counters, and counters aren't good, cast Faithless Looting. Discard 2 counters. You just got 2 new cards. Now, there is, of course, card disadvantage, but if you're binning 2 counter spells and you draw a threat and a bolt, or a bolt and a visions or scour or land even, chances are you're not really going down a card, even if you end up down 1 card, because really a counter spell is not a card in that scenario. So if you discard a counter spell and a mandrills that you can't cast, and you find a bolt and a land, you're up at least 1 card, maybe 1.5. So I'm thinking that's going to be a fun time. I'm really excited to cast some Faithless Lootings. Young Pyromancer, I wanted to try out on the one hand just because they were running it, and maybe Faithless Looting isn't actually all that good, and Peasy's actually where it's at. And secondly, we have 14 very real clocks in this list. Delver, Goyf, Mandrills, and Peasy. Snapcaster Mage obviously not a threat. I cut Savage Knuckleblade because, one, they weren't playing it, and although I'm definitely putting my own twist on the list, also including the fact that some of their choices I don't think I could handle just being able to navigate through games with, and also because I want to play the cards I'm used to and the cards that I like. But anyways, I cut Nux because we had to cut a creature at that point, and they had 3 Peasies, so I wanted to try 3 Peasies. Their second list has only 2 Peasies, but it goes up to 4 Mandrills. I don't really want to try that in this go. They also ended up cutting Traverse for that, and we all know that I love Traverse to death. So I'm going to go 3 Mandrills, 3 Peasy, try it out. We have a lot of 2-drops now. We have Goyf and Peasy as our resident fake 2-drop, Snapcaster Mage as well, but that's pretty clear it's not, unless you're in a real pinch. You can play a 1-2 Goyf, you can play a Peasy without having a spell up, although we prefer to play our Goyfs on 2 after it's bolt proof. We have a lot of threats now, and a lot of them, and pretty much all of them, come down early. And I'm hoping this means we can be very aggressive, which is another problem I've been having in some games, where you have a Delver and it dies and then you don't have a threat, or you have a couple threats and they die, or you have a couple threats against ad nauseum and they just don't do much. You have a 1/1 Delver, maybe it even transforms soon, it's a 3/2, and you have a 3/4 Goyf, and you just have a lot of distance to cover. In some games, you just want to have a bunch of creatures, which hopefully is another thing looting is going to do well. Finding us those creatures when we need them, and getting rid of them when we don't. When you have 4 creatures against ad nauseum, and you really need a counterspell, discard 1 or 2. Try to dig. I like the idea. Also, because it's not actually a, looting? It's a looting effect, not a rummaging effect. For those of you who know mechanic slang, looting is when you draw and then discard. Rummaging is when you discard then draw, which of course is huge, especially in matchups like ad nauseum, where if you had to discard your 2 creatures and then you drew into 2 lands, you'd probably be pretty upset. Whereas if you drew those 2 lands first and then you go, okay, this isn't good, but I'm going to end up playing out these creatures, hoping that I can just slam a bunch of threats and maybe close out, even though I'm not interacting very well. So I'm hoping Faithless Looting and PZ do a bunch of work. Some other changes that are pretty noticeable. I left these Vapor Snags in the front here so we could all see them. We have 3 Vapor Snags. They actually play 4. But I don't... This is one of the things I was talking about. I don't think I could live with playing 4 Vapor Snags. Maybe Faithless Looting makes that acceptable, but I had to change the 4th one to a Dismember. I love Dismember. Great card. I think it's going to be even better with looting, by the same vein of Vapor Snag being fine with looting. If it's bad, just discard it. We have 4 of these. I'm expecting to see them fairly consistently. So I'm going into this assuming that when we have a bad card, we can probably get rid of it. So game 1 against Burn, we draw Dismember, dump it, find a counter, find a cantrip, find a bolt, something like that. Find a blocker, find a threat. So I could see having 4 Vapor Snag being totally fine. I don't want to try it. I'm not looking to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I'll go with 3. I like the idea of having a bunch of Vapor Snags and just going hard on tempo. We have a bunch of these early threats. We have cards that reward us for playing them. I think, in theory, I see how this is going to play out, and it's going to be awesome. We're going to go turn 1 Delver, turn 2 PZ, turn 3 Faithless Looting, churn through some stuff, throw some counterspells, Bolt, Forked Bolt, Vapor Snag. Suddenly we won the game. On the other hand, I could see the games where it goes in the opposite direction, where we have a bunch of Vapor Snags in our deck, and even if we're not up against control or combo, creatureless combo that is, where the Vapor Snags are just totally dead, even if you're up against a mid-range deck, sometimes they're not at their best. You need that pressure still to make Vapor Snag good. So, Dismember is slightly it's a hedge. It's a hedge. It's slightly better in those scenarios where you're up against your mid-range opponent, or maybe even your aggro opponent, and you just want to put something 6 feet under instead of bouncing it back to their hand, whereas the Vapor Snag wouldn't be as good. I want to try running a bunch of the bounce effects. I'm excited for it. I want to tempo some guys out. I don't want to run 4 of them. Other changes, Spell Pierce. I have not played Spell Pierce. I think definitely not on this channel. I used to play it when I was first getting into Rug, because I played it in Blue-Red, where obviously it's much better than Denial. So I had experience with Pierce, and Denial I was still iffy on. Right now, I am pretty well convinced that Stubborn Denial is one of the greatest cards there ever was. That's an exaggeration, of course, but I love it. Spell Pierce, it's much better with Young Pyromancer. That's how I'm looking at this. So, Young Pyromancer, you want to be able to protect. If you're playing it as a 2-drop, run it out there, hope it sticks. If you're playing it as a pseudo 2-drop on turn 3, when you have another land, you want to either protect it, or hopefully get your free 1/1 in addition to bolting their dude, snaring something, casting a Thought Scour on end step, or in response to their removal spell, something to that effect. So if you're playing your PZ after turn 2, you want to get your pseudo value out of it, or you want to protect it. Spell Pierce is much better at protecting young Pyromancer than Stubborn Denial is. That is a fact. It is pay 2 minus 1, let's say, 1 generic mana better at protecting young Pyromancer. If your opponent goes a path on your end step, you might be able to pierce it in a scenario where you couldn't denial it. If they go Bolt, Fatal Push, if they play out one of their threats, Gideon of the Trials. This is actually something Chaffee specifically mentioned in the MTG Salvation Rug Delver thread. If you guys haven't been there, you should check it out. It's great. I haven't been active there for a little while I was kind of sort of not really going hard on Magic the last month, maybe 2 months or so. You probably noticed on the channel we had a lot fewer videos. I'll try to pick that up a bit more, probably not as much as it used to be when I was playing 1 league every week, sometimes 2, but check out the thread if you haven't been there. They mentioned specifically Gideon of the Trials on turn 4 against Blue-White. Spell Pierce is a lot better than Denial there, because they have to pay 2 and they can't, and Gideon of the Trials, which is very annoying for our deck, suddenly bites the dust instead of sneaking by. Now, that is a very specific scenario that probably won't come up very often, if much at all, but it's just the kind of thing where if they have that extra bit of mana up, Spell Pierce sometimes gets them when Denial doesn't. Obviously, Denial as 1 mana negate is our bread and butter, and their first list actually was like 4 Pierce, 1 Denial, and I don't think I can go down to 1 Denial, and I definitely can't go up to 4 Pierce. That was the main thing beyond the Vapor Snags. I don't think I can live with playing 4 Spell Pierce in a list. Their current list, I think, is a 2-2 split, like what we're doing here. I like that a lot better. I feel a lot better with it. Once again, conditional spells, Faithless Looting, probably going to be great for. If Pierce is good, keep it. If it's not, send it to the graveyard. Look for something better. But once again, we're trying this out. I think it's going to be good with PZ. If we didn't have PZ, I almost certainly wouldn't be running this. It's also good in conjunction with Delver, if you think about it. It's not necessarily protecting your Delver, but it might. Turn 2, Delver, hold up Spell Pierce looks a lot better than Delver, hold up Denial. Other stuff I want to talk about, all these cards I either mentioned or we play, these ones as well. We're keeping this Traverse because, like I said, I love it. Their current list cut the Traverse, but they went up to 4 Mandrills, and in that case, you probably do want to cut Traverse. We're only running the 3, so I like it. Also, I'm expecting Faithless Looting to make Traverse even better. So that's all for the main board. The sideboard. I didn't really start from scratch. I looked at what they had as a sideboard, and a lot of their cards fall into the same categories that we usually run. I didn't sort this, but you have your Artifact Hate that we always run, your mid-range Haymakers, which they actually don't run because they focus more on specific matchups, your Land Hate, Tron Hate, Artifact Hate, Combo Hate, Sweepers, Life Gain. So their sideboard, their current version, I could pull it up, but I'm not going to. It's going to be there if you guys want to see it. I'm going to generalize. It has a bunch of Life Gain in Feed the Clan. It has all 4 Damping Sphere to just try to shut down Tron for as long as possible while you get in there. Slow down combo decks like Storm ad nauseum. It's got a bunch of Artifact Hate and a bunch of counter spells. Their main board, I believe, currently has 7. Their first version that I saw had 6. I'm running 6. I like having counters in the sideboard. We've got Deprive. We have Pseudo Click, or Pseudo Counter Click. We've got Rejection for when it's good, Tron, Eggs, that kind of stuff. I like having counters in the board, but they have far more than I'm in for, and they also have way more life gain. Well, to be fair, between Huntmaster and Basilisk Collar, I think I have as much life gain as they do, but... And they actually mentioned Burn being very prominent online, which is something I'm interested in, because we also play exclusively online at this point. So if that is true, maybe I am going to want to switch a Huntmaster and maybe another slot over to Feed the Clan to improve that Burn matchup. But unless this version, the Burn matchup, is specifically worse than I'm hoping it's going to be, I don't think I'm going to run any Feed the Clan. Their plan basically was to increase their win percentage as much as possible against Tron, combo decks, burn, artifact hate, stuff like that, and then run the counters in the sideboard for where they come in, I believe is what they were going for. I gotta say, I like this sideboard than I've been running for a while, and I made a new sideboard guide for this list for the top 8 decks in the meta, I think. At least that's on MTG Goldfish, so I don't think we know what decks are the most prominent. But anyways, I took a look at that, and Vendilion Click's really the only one that's not great. It comes in a couple matchups. The other are 3 or more with, I think, 4 5s here and a few 4s. So most of these cards are still fantastic in the way I would sideboard the list, at least. I haven't seen how Chaffee sideboards, and if Chaffee puts out a sideboard guide, I'm definitely going to read it and take inspiration from it, because I'm just going into these matchups the way I think they're going to play out. I haven't played with Faithless Looting, I think, at all seriously in Modern, and I haven't touched Peasy for a while, especially not this far into the deep end of the Pyromancer. So for all I know, I'm sideboarding wrong. So I'd love to actually find out how they think we should be sideboarding, but I'm going to go with the same sideboard because I like what it does. Mid-range and combo, we got mid-range, we got more. A lot of our cards, all of these are great for mid-range while also being good against aggro, combo, aggro, and aggro again. We've got Revelry, obviously. Who doesn't run their artifact hate? Pyroclasm and Anger are the sweepers I like. They prefer Fire Spout. That's just preference, though. I'm in for being a little cheaper and hitting the graveyard a little bit for Dredge, Hollow One. I prefer Blood Moon. I haven't actually tried out Damping Sphere. I probably should, but I like that Blood Moon, once again, good against mid-range decks. Spreading Seas, good against mid-range decks. I've got these 9 cards that are all good against mid-range decks, but they all do other things as well. Vendilion Click is probably the most egregious example of a card that I have almost solely for mid-range and control, but it's also kind of nice against combo, even though combo isn't that prominent, so maybe it shouldn't be here, but maybe it's just fine. I don't know. Anyways, this is what we're going to be playing for the next little while. I'm going to start off with a friendly league, at least one, because like I said, I don't actually know how this is going to play out, and I also don't really know how to play this deck. I'm basically going to be going with what I do know and improvising a little bit when the lootings and the pyromancers show up. The lootings I expect to make a bunch of mistakes with, just not looting too soon when I don't have enough information on what I need in the matchup. Looting, being stuck in my hand when I need to cast something else. Looting wrong, discarding something I actually end up wanting, keeping something I don't. Looting too late, early I already mentioned. Looting at the wrong time, maybe I should be looting around this point in the game, but not on this turn because I need to cast these other spells. Using Spell Pierce wrong, playing Pyromancer wrong. I expect to make a lot of mistakes. We're definitely not back to square one because this is very much Rug Delver, especially with the sideboard that I pretty well know. I don't want to say in and out at this point, but I'm pretty used to this kind of sideboard. So I want to say that I'm going to have a lot of familiarity with this, but we're also going into new territory, and I don't want to jump into competitive and gush a bunch of ticks. So we're going to start off friendly and see how it goes. I would love for this to be the new way of Rug Delver because it looks sweet. Making a bunch of tokens is fun, and I really love the idea of Faithless Looting. I've just played a few tournament practice matches, and it just looks like so much fun playing Pyromancer again and just churning through the deck, keeping what I want, and sending back what we don't. Once again, the wrong half of the deck problem. I don't want to say I really feel like this is going to be the thing, like Faithless Looting is going to be the nuts, this is what does it for us. But I really like the idea of just having, it makes your one-offs even better. The way Serum Visions does, where you could find that 1 or 2 cards that you play to make those cards even better. if your Vendilion Click ends up being really bad because you didn't get double blue because you wanted to play around Blood Moon instead this game, get rid of it. Throw it out. Who needs it? If it's not going to help you, just dump it and find something better. I love the idea of this card. Not making enough land drops for Huntmaster against an aggro deck. Throw it away. Find some interaction. Making too many land drops. Get rid of the lands. Too much interaction. Find your Huntmaster. Find your Click. It helps you to find your one-offs and your silver bullets, kind of in the same way Traverse does, but it also lets you dump them when they're bad. Traverse as well. Someone just hit you with a relic, throw out Traverse. Rest in Peace resolved. Leyline of the Void came down. Faithless looting. Find the right cards. Get rid of the wrong ones. I think it's going to be awesome, and I really hope that it is completely amazing. It's definitely going to be fun. I'm looking forward to casting some lootings. This should be... I think it's going to be a great build. Okay, I shouldn't say that. I hope it's going to be a great build. It looks like, to me, in theory, I think it's going to be fantastic. And obviously, that's my enthusiasm for the deck talking, but it looks like a lot of fun. I want to play it. I want to churn through the deck. And like I said, we have two halves to our deck. We're playing aggro control. I want to throw out the wrong one, find the right one, and see if we can win some matches. Anyways, I hope to be playing this probably starting this weekend. I'll start up the friendly league, and we'll get some matches in. We'll start learning how to play the deck, and we'll see how it goes. I imagine the sideboard is going to be tweaked probably before the main board, because the main board is basically what Chaffee's running, mixed in with what I usually run, with the Dismember, the Tarfire, the Traverse, that sort of decision. So I don't expect that to change very much, because I'm assuming they tuned their decisions, and I know I love the cards that I play. So I'm thinking the main board, unless I'm doing something totally wrong, the main board is probably going to be fairly consistent, maybe with some one-offs moving around. The sideboard, I wouldn't be surprised if it just changes totally. Maybe what you're supposed to be doing with the Pyromancers and the lootings, you can afford to play a really tempo-heavy game, and I shouldn't be running Huntmaster, Vendilion Click. I don't want to say EE or Basilisk Collar, because those cards are just amazing. Even 3 Blood Moons, maybe you go to 2 Blood Moons. Maybe Blood Moon is even better in some matchups, because when you don't fetch around Blood Moon and you top deck it, you could throw it out. And when you do play around Blood Moon, but your opponent does as well, you can just dump it for a better card. So maybe cards like these get better, maybe they get worse, because now you can just focus on playing tempo and actually find the cards you need in the matchup. Maybe you can play tempo against decks like Humans and play more of a tempo game against Burn, even though we're still tempo, but we have Huntmasters. Maybe you do just want those silver bullet cards that we're going to run 2, 3, maybe even 4 of for those kinds of matchups. Just a bunch of Feed the Clans to say, Burn opponent, you're going to lose, because you can afford to do that with this kind of shell. I don't think I've ever played as aggressive a rug list. Maybe with Shoal, but you obviously can't play Shoal and Looting because of how much they work against each other. They both are card disadvantaged, so you're going to run your hand right into the ground. Looting can't be pitched to Shoal, so you obviously can't have any kind of... Maybe you could fit them, but you're going to have to build the deck in a very particular way to get it all to work together. So I haven't played anything as aggressive as this besides Shoal, and Shoal is just a different kind of beast, where you don't have... I think I want the looting to be such that I want this card to give us the ability to just play tempo, and if counter spells are bad because our opponent's on discard, we just get rid of them, and we find our Vapor Snags and our burn spells, and we finish off the game. And if counter spells are good, we find those. If Vapor Snag is bad, even against a mid-range opponent, this is the kind of card, I think, where it's going to help us pivot within games, as opposed to the sideboard pivoting within matches, where if you have your counter spells and your Vapor Snags, you're playing a tempo game, whereas if you have Dismember and your creatures, and maybe even bolt to an extent where you're aiming them at creatures. You're playing more of a mid-range game, where Faithless looting, just like Serum Visions lets you do, it's going to allow you to, theoretically, of course, I haven't played enough of the deck to say that this is actually going to be awesome and we're going to do this, but theoretically, it's going to let you play a tempo game, and you're going to be able to say, okay, this is the half of the deck I need. These are the cards that I want, and your sideboard isn't going to have to be as tuned towards letting you shift to mid-range, because you can already kind of do that with Faithless looting. You can have some mid-range elements in the sideboard, and then when you need to be aggressive, you just go for the aggressive half. When you need to be controlling against an aggro deck, you go for that half. So maybe cards like Vapor Snag and Spell Pierce, they're where it's at with Faithless looting, because you can just get rid of them if they're bad, and if they're good, awesome, tempo them out and close the game. Whereas in tons of matchups, these are the kinds of cards that I would traditionally sideboard out against a mid-range deck. Vapor Snag to some extent. I believe in my sideboard plan. I don't actually have... Mardu Pyromancer is the only mid-range deck I have here, and Vapor Snag's obviously bad because I just threw the sideboard guide together because I wanted to get a feel for how this sideboard would work with the deck, see if I needed to change any cards right away, and I think it's pretty okay. I didn't go with as many matchups because obviously I didn't want to spend all day making a sideboard guide, but these are the kinds of cards that fall off in mid-range matchups, whereas Vapor Snag's still sometimes just great for closing out games, but if all your guys are dead, it doesn't do a lot. But maybe if you don't have threats, discard Vapor Snag. If you do have threats, dig for Vapor Snag. So I like the idea of playing a more tempo-centric 60, and even having tempo-centric, I don't want to say hate cards, but basically hate cards in your sideboard, and just using Faithless looting to glue it all together and make it tick, where you could have a bunch of Feed the Clans, and you don't need Blood Moon so much, but Blood Moon still looks fantastic. I don't know. I'm going to play with it. I'm going to see how it goes. I hope to see you guys in those matches. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to do some experimenting. Let's do some science. I'll see you guys there.